Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Marketing Roundtable, a digital marketing podcast. My name is Brandon Jones, and I'm the producer along with a paid media strategist, and I'm going to kick it over to Brian Cosgrove, the host for today.
Hi, I'm Brian Cosgrove, Principal Brain Do and Analytics Strategist, and I'm happy to be here today to speak with Ben Yurchak.
Hi, Ben Yurchak. I am the founder of KnowClick. We're an in-the-moment user insights company.
Welcome on. It's a pleasure to have you, Ben.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So Ben, I'm glad we got to make this happen. We've known each other for many years here in the Philadelphia area. You've come to all of our analytics events over these years. And I know that you built your own technology that you've been doing for quite some time now to be able to go and solve some really challenging issues that people aren't able to get out of just looking at clickstream analytics. Can you tell me a little bit about what your company is and what you do?
Sure. Yeah, we call ourselves in-the-moment user insights because we run very high response intercept surveys at websites at key moments when people are willing to give feedback. And every time people hear survey, it's like, yeah, I don't take those. There's a lot of concern about that from how most are done. We do them pretty differently in that we're listening for the right point in time to trigger these. And we're also watching what they do so we can ask the most relevant question. So instead of an NPS type question, net promoter score type question, when someone shortly after they arrive, we ask them, "Oh, you left that video pretty quick, but what was missing from that?" Or you left the checkout process. What stopped you? What weren't we doing that you needed? And when you start that relevance, you can actually get a good response. And so ours will be 15, 20% response to sometimes 60 or 70 if it's a very high intent event. And so we're hearing from, and a really important point, we're hearing from people in the moment. These people are in the decision journey. They're trying to accomplish something. They're trying to get information. They're trying to do certain actions. And when you hear from them in the moment, typically at the end of their visit, you can really learn a lot about what motivated them, what stopped them, what actually helped them. And it's a level of insight that just web analytics and interactions can't provide, right? So there's always so many digital analytics, web analytics, so insightful, so informative, but then there's always a ton of unanswered questions. We're trying to answer most of those overall. And so I'll include some stories throughout this around just some of the things you're able to find that are just big gaps in the industry overall.
Yeah, I think this is interesting. I mean, so some of our audience here, they haven't done a ton of surveys, or some of them maybe did surveys for market research, or they might have done net promoter score, or a lot of people here are obviously used to getting surveys after a customer service call or at the end of a chat. Tell me a little bit more about the kinds of surveys you'd already touched on it, but give me some specific examples of where you're inserting a survey that maybe isn't as commonplace,
Okay.
and maybe some of the kinds of questions that you might ask that make what you're doing a bit different.
Yeah. No, it's a good question overall. So there's some things around, like, so we have one of our clients in the home improvement space, has a build your piece of this house functionality. I won't describe in more detail than that. And so we trigger a survey after they finish that to figure out that process, because most of those people use this, they go through all this extensive customization of this certain feature, and then they leave the website. It's like, so did that help them? Were they frustrated? We had high engagement, which is great, but what did it actually mean? And so we found out is, you had, and this is a company that doesn't enable much online selling of it. Most of the people actually who had intent to buy wanted to buy online, and they didn't know how to actually do that from there. There wasn't strong calls to action on that, because that's their process is, we're going to have a salesperson walk you through this.
Yeah.
And so we'll ask questions like, did
Hmm.
this have what you expected? What did you want to do next? And so on. And that's actually when someone engages with your site, different types of features, let's say B2B site, you download a white paper or something like that, or even you become a lead, or you request a demo, or you get asked for a quote, or you engage with some video. What do you want to do next? Right. So sometimes, like,
Right.
when people
Right.
become a lead, I would say over 90% of a lead gen process, you become a lead and it's over. Right. So you get a thank you page. Okay. What we found is we'll often survey people at that point, because you don't want to ask a bunch of questions like ahead of entering your personal information because you don't want to create friction. We'll ask you often, what do you want to do next? What was your intent there? And we'll find out that usually about 2/3 plus want to do something else in the site and they don't know where to go. And so we're able to find out what was important to them and then help to actually not just learn and pass some of that information with consent to to the lead gen process, but we'll actually help to drive them to the right content. So sometimes those people want to buy and we help direct them to the purchase process. And, we've had even just the act of doing these surveys will sometimes have like a 30% lift in purchase from these people because we're helping direct them. So that's one area that is not like, it's shocking to us just how willing those people are who just became a lead or signed up or something like that to share some additional input, yet how few actually do it. Another example would be one of our clients in the travel space. We saw that, they have a very low conversion as typical, right? Because a lot of people are checking things out, but they're great at getting people into the booking, right? So you enter the destination you want to go, you enter dates, number of travelers, all that stuff. You're entering all those things and people go through the booking process and abandon. So why, right? So we would ask at exit, which some people do, right? That's not incredibly uncommon. It's not done really well in most of the cases, but we actually started like shortly after they've entered the booking piece. We would just trigger like actually an embedded survey within it, made it feel like part of the experience. Like, are you intending to book now or some other time? And so if they said some other time, we actually help to redirect it towards getting the booking information they want and then get their email so you can follow up those people so they will actually come back when they're ready. And, we had like 50% willing to do that, which is shocking, right? And what we found was if you said you had intent to book, you converted a decent rate. If you said you weren't planning on booking now, almost none converted. So the idea of actually getting their email and being able to follow up them, and I mean none converted, I mean, they didn't convert now and few ever returned. This wasn't like a
Interesting.
Hilton type site where you already have loyalty and stuff like that. It's a site you use for very occasional processes, right? So there's always a difference in the
Right.
sites that matter. So that's another example. But our most common thing is we're triggering at exit, right? So we're trying to predict. We listen for watch what they're doing. We're trying to predict when they're getting ready to leave. In the industry, the more common thing is actually rated exit. We try to do it about 10% earlier because people have much more willingness to answer a few questions at that point. So we're looking for signals that they're about done and we'll ask them a few questions about their experience. These will take like 40, 50 seconds. We get a good 4 or 5 questions answered, make this super user friendly. And then so things like, did you find what you wanted, right? Then that's not earth shattering, right?
Yeah.
Did you find what you
Right.
wanted? How did this help? How did this help you? Did this increase your interest in using this company or not? And then a few questions around why. And some of them are open-ended, but most of them are closed-ended because people don't want to type. We're trying to keep this really, really easy and engaging. And then ultimately things like, what do you want improved? Right. Now, we never start with that question because no one will, like, you don't want to think, right? Once you get people engaged by having some easy, relevant questions, then you can ask a few more complicated questions overall. So things like, what do you want improved? Like, so for brands, it's like, I'm considering this or this or this on my site. Well, let's hear from your actual people that stopped and didn't buy from you. Or if it's
Yeah.
in e-commerce, for people who just engaged with your content and left, what would have been helpful for them? And you're hearing from sometimes thousands of your visitors right in the moment. That is very weighty information, right? It's very, you can say that we can show it's not a skewed sample. These are your actual visitors and we can watch what they did and we can have them tell us what stopped them from going to the key content that you wanted them to go to. That, it's not some of the things they say they want doesn't move the needle as much, but most of them actually has a very direct effect. So
So I think about decisioning. I think about, um, you know, without this information, people are making guesses. Or to your point, they just might think, hey, the lead is done. They're not, they don't have any evidence on what to do next. And sometimes that devolves into, well, that's just an opinion. There's no sort of gravity to it. You're creating you're closing the loop there where someone says, I think we should do this is no longer just a random theory. It is, it's not just based on how confident am I in the person recommending it. It's now saying, no, there's evidence. Now that we have evidence, if I don't do this,
Mhm.
there may be risk.
Mhm.
And it feels like it's moving these conversations forward that otherwise might have gotten stuck in theorizing without actual any information. And so you're providing a distinct data set there. And you mentioned something about trying to predict 10% before they quit.
Mhm.
I always find this part interesting on the web because quitting just means closing the browser, just means clicking away, just means being done somehow. Tell me a little bit more about these exit surveys of how you know that maybe, hey, this is the time to give the survey because there's a good chance they're going to leave.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's super, I'm not trying to obfuscate things. It is really complex around it, right? So there's certain things that
Yeah.
are, the classic exit prediction, and it's not really a prediction, it's someone on desktop mouses off towards the back button. But of course, that's oversimplified because it depends where you are. If you're on the original page you go towards the back button, you're leaving in most cases. If you're on page 3 or 4 and you go towards the back button, you might be going back to the last page. So you want to listen for that too, right? So the idea,
Quite interesting.
yeah, and then there's
Yeah.
parts of it where and so this is not I always set expectations here. It's not an exact science. We're going to be triggering early in some cases. So the question always, you have to be cautious around, you want a question that can appeal to somebody to start this. Um, that isn't like being certain that they're actually done their visit, right? So how helpful has this
Right.
been type thing, rather than saying, now that you're leaving, what do you think? Right. Cause it's not a perfect science. But yeah, so signals like you actually lose focus on, which for some of your more technical listeners will know this, you lose focus on the website, they go to something else and they come back. Most of those people are actually going to be leaving at that point. Rapidly scroll towards the top of the page a few times, and you certain mouse signals, they're probably going to leave after that. The idea of rage clicks, we were actually really excited about that years ago. We're like, oh, this will be great. We're going to intervene right at that point. We'll figure out why. We'll help redirect them. And we find out it's like 2 or 3% of our visitors just can't do anything, right? And I don't
Right.
know.
Right.
Yeah, rage clicks has been one of those things that you have high hopes. It sounds awesome, and then you try to execute on it, it's like, yeah, very few people are doing this. There's much
So
more,
interesting.
I don't care, I'm leaving the site rather than I'm going to be angry at it.
I'm also curious if you start hitting the rage click, are they already emotionally past the point of being able to answer a survey?
Yeah,
You
it's,
know?
well, it's how you ask right at that point, right? So, and that's, the whole voice of customer space has the potential value it could have is enormous. The
Mhm.
actual execution and delivery on that is such a disappointment for how people do things. I mean, we don't think we fall in that category, but there's a lot of things we do to make work. But the classic things are, okay, I'm gonna get feedback by putting a feedback button on. Okay, right? You're gonna get like 0.01% of people to respond. They're gonna be the ones who care enough to actually give you the feedback. And if you are looking for technical problems, especially if you have a loyal customer base, that's a useful thing. Don't ever try to say that this is representative of your traffic. If you find some things that you think might work and they're really easy to fix, sure thing. If you are trying to use that feedback to actually make significant changes to your digital experience or campaigns or whatever it is, you're walking on really, really shaky ground for that, right? And it's going to get shot down. It's like, okay, wait, 0.01% of people took this. How do we know these are
Right.
the actual visitors? So that's one example. The other common example, even when people um, show questions, the most common one by far is net promoter score. So how likely are you to recommend us on a scale of 0 to 10? And the whole calculation that's done. You have promoters and detractors, and it's a validated methodology for established customers, right? So I think I forget it's BCG or one of them, created that methodology. They checked it out. They found, wow, this is whatever, 20-ish years ago. They found it's really predictive at that point in time of people staying a customer or not. Well, so people said, well, what do we ask on our websites? Oh, that net promoter score. We use that everywhere. Let's do that. So someone's on your site for 30 seconds. You say, how likely you recommend us on a scale of 0 to 10? It's like, who are you? Right? I just started looking at the site and it's get out of here, leave me alone, and they'll X out of it. Or some of the people hit 5, right? We see a huge spike in 5s on websites for people who are prospects. So generally in the big picture look, companies are reasonably good at understanding their, and I say reasonably with a grain of salt here, but their customers, people who've chosen to buy from them. You have a lot more connection to those people, a lot more opportunity for, B2B, your sales force is talking to them. So you have there's a direct line, you understand some things. Your e-commerce, you have an opportunity to follow up surveys really easily. A lot of people do post checkout, and those aren't super hard. The stuff I'm describing is hard. This stuff is not that hard to get a response. But the prospects, like the people who haven't bought from you before, how do you engage and hear from them and hear their drivers? That's where the big gap is. So I was looking at this like, when you think about and we're talking now enterprises overall, not small companies, but they're going to have some market research done on, here's my target audience, here's what they want and think and so on. But those people are just like by demographics or role, this is what their interests and needs, and here's how they typically go about the buying process and stuff. And how are they getting that information? Well, they're sometimes talking to their customers to find that out. Sometimes they're just talking to people in certain roles overall. But almost none of those people are actually in the journey trying to make a decision. Right? They're pontificating. And some of that's useful, right? It's like, here's the things I like and dislike. Here's what I want and not like. Very good to do, useful, and so on. But when it comes to, when you think about if you're around your digital experience, okay, I take people in, now they're coming to my site. These people are different than the earlier journey ones. People aren't in journey, right? They're different than your customers. If they're considering you, it's like, okay, I'm just learning about you. I've looked at other companies in this space. I have a general more sense of what I'm trying to make certain decisions. Here's the thing, like let's say B2B, I'm trying to figure out who should be on my short list, or I'm trying to make a pitch to my CFO. You're trying to do something there, like healthcare professional site, right? So healthcare professionals, some of those people are already prescribing. They have a patient with a new indication or indication they haven't treated with this before. They're trying to get certain information that they don't describe very well in other cases. Patients, right? On that side, we do a lot of pharma. You just were diagnosed with cancer this morning, right? We get a lot of those people newly diagnosed in the last day or two. It's a completely different mindset and decision process than people who you surveyed 6 months after they got diagnosed with cancer, who've gone through a very thorough journey to understand the whole process, the anxiety, the uncertainty, all the usability best practices around users, like the assumption, users know their task, put those clear options for them to take around what to go next. It doesn't work, right? You think it would work, but it doesn't. Like the mindset is, I just found out I need to confirm, no, is what my doctor said, right? Like I'm hearing these other things. They need help walking through a process, not being self-directed. They need you to help direct them. Another example outside of that, one of our, and we see this pattern a lot. So high consideration products where like you have to make a significant decision and research around it. You go to a site, it lists, here are all our offerings for this category. So you see 20 or 30 things. The decision anxiety that users have. That's actually a phrase that is used a fair amount now. ChatGPT introduced me that. Better way of describing it was, I call it like choice paralysis before, but that decision anxiety I think fits better. But what we found is when we surveyed people at those pages, like right after they viewed that listing of products and like, why didn't they continue on to get more information on one of those? The first question we would ask them often is, did you find one of these that you wanted to get that you feel like are a fit? And it's always it's like 60, 70% say unsure. It's like,
Right.
Then we would drill down, right? So the other side of that surveys is it shouldn't be a one-time fix thing. It's let's drill down and learn and learn and learn. So what we would often find out is I didn't know how to compare. I didn't know which one was best and so on. And so I'll give you one story on this front. Did stuff in the this one space where people were given, they would actually, so this is the tire vehicle place space. People would they would enter their vehicle information to get tire size. They enter their zip code and they'd see this. You go through that process. You see a long list of tires. And we said to this client, like, so we find that a lot of users are struggling on which one to pick. And like, yeah, but we're known for having the best inventory of tires, we can't not show all these. And we're like, oh, your users are really struggling. How about you try a test where you show 3 or 4 and do some good merchandising decision where one is one of the premium brands, one is the lower price, one is sort of in the middle, so people can actually choose. No, yeah, we don't like that because we're known for the most tires. So run as a test. So they ran, to their credit, they ran as a test. Their online conversion more than doubled from that. It's like, okay. But then they said, well, we're trying to get people in the store, and we know most people don't get online. So we still think it hurts. I'm like, yeah, the survey metrics are all like, this is super helpful. Like people who saw that page versus the others, they're like, yeah. And we said, okay, how about we do a more in-depth project where we tie this to you have a database of customers. We'll ask the users on a survey to share their contact info and to follow up with them later and get their consent. And we followed up with them later and we tied it to their database and found out the people who saw the 3 or 4 options versus the full list converted in the store at like, I think it was over like 50-60% higher, right? Showed up with dollar values, and this is like over 20 million in additional sales. So like,
this is incredible.
So you see that, it's like, so then it's the people who are sort of like ignoring the methodology, just want a few insights. They're like, wait, how'd you get this again? What'd you do? Like they dive into it and it's like, okay, now that's a very, very different decision that you make from that. And this isn't like, so we see this in so many spaces. We actually ran a test where one of our clients in a communication space had all these different offerings, bundled offerings and so on. We said, well, how about if we pre-filter this based on which thing you said in the survey that you cared about most? So we ran like basically an arrival survey, just what are the services you want? What's your role? Okay, let's get out of your way. It takes 15 seconds. And then we would pre-filter for some as a test and leave it as is for control. And in some cases, this was like over a 2x lift in purchases by pre-filtering it. And what we found was happening is that it depended on which thing we were pre-filtering on. Some actually did a little worse, but most did significantly better, because there were some cases where the offering they had that they didn't want was priced so well, but the one they wanted was priced poorly relative to the two. So that like, I can't get this. And other cases where it was vice versa. The one you wanted was so you wanted to show them the price badly one because they didn't want that. And the price, really good priced one is the one they wanted. It helped them say, oh, I feel good about making this decision. So there's also merchandising decisions around that. Does that make sense overall?
Yeah, no, it does. It's so interesting to me. I mean, there's kind of a lot that you just said there that I want to unpack. So just bear
sorry,
with me.
I'm going to do that, and I will try not to, but I will anyway.
And that's fine. That's fine. That's where it's so interesting. So the decisioning piece is, when you pride yourself on having the best selection, it's almost like they feel like it's undermining or somehow like threatening what they're doing by helping reduce options.
Yeah.
But to your point, if you're trying to buy tires, you're not trying to buy all the tires. And as much as you might be impressed that they have all the tires, you want to buy the tire for you.
Yep.
And I think about in retail when they're like, customers usually keep this, or, popular items, things like that. That helps you make those decisions. It helps you work through. You're looking for just a reason to choose one thing over another.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, when you start sharing like a million options, instead of the problem being, hey, do I buy something or do I, go in a direction versus not doing anything, it becomes, but I don't know which direction to go to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you create the paralysis because it's like, if you just made it, hey, are you going to move in a direction or not? Then it's easy.
Mm-hmm.
The decision's fairly straightforward. When you start saying, well, do you want to, you can go any of these 18 items. And it sounds like your surveys help people cut through them. Like you're proactively helping with decisioning. And this kind of survey, as you mentioned, is something that you were doing kind of early on. It's an early
for that application.
piece.
Exactly. That was it. Yeah. And so we can trigger it obviously at almost any time. And the one of, and it's something that's not intuitive to people, but we'll often ask a few questions at arrival. Those have to be really well designed because you want to be non-interruptive. You want to have it feel like it adds to the experience. We've actually run
Right.
everything to test and control, meaning you're eligible. Some people see the survey, some people see nothing, and we track behavior, which I haven't talked a whole lot about, but every survey we do ties to behavior, which really matters. So we can ask a few questions and make sure we're not hurting things. And in most cases, it actually has a slight lift in engagement. In some cases, it has no, and then in rare cases, it actually hurts. It's like, okay, that's interesting. So, but most of the time, it's a positive. And sometimes we intentionally do things like, for example, we help drive a lot of leads.
Hmm.
And it happened by accident, right? It's a classic thing. It's like I can't compare this to the invention of penicillin on scale, but the analogy applies, right? It's like we're tracking to make sure our surveys don't hurt engagement or conversion. And we saw some that had like a 30, show the survey to like a 30% lift in conversion versus people who didn't. We're like, what? How is this? Is something wrong? I go back to the team, like, are we sure we're doing this right? Are we skewing it? It's like, no. It's like, then we looked through our questions and sometimes we randomized certain questions. We saw when certain questions displayed, those people converted higher than when other questions displayed. Like, that's interesting. And so some of the time the survey makes you aware of what the site offers. Right. So something about, something about, what do you think of our online appointments? Oh, I didn't know you had them. I would love to schedule an online appointment. Or did
Right.
asking about our product line, which things do you want? What's important to you? Oh, you have that, right? So that's the thing that creates the biggest lift. Some of the other things are just when you ask good questions that are non-intrusive, that show you actually care about them rather than Net Promoter Score. Yeah. Net Promoter, again, has a place, but I'll keep bashing it. There's a connection there. So it helps a little bit. Now, that's not going to be like you're going to have a massive impact on conversion that, but it's one of those little things that helps add to the experience itself. If you do it well.
So it's such a craft to pace the reality of the site, the context, the users, and kind of walking in their shoes where they are in the experience, and to design kind of the right strategy
Mhm.
for this kind of prompting. It's like, just by asking this question, you are indirectly alluding to, hey, we have this feature and
Yeah.
you may want to go check it out. You're also potentially getting feedback if they don't care.
Yep.
Like you win no matter what.
Yeah.
And to your point, that lift, it's like they put so much effort into creating these features or these options within their site, but they have a gap in how they communicate on how to get to it or how they draw attention to it.
Mhm.
When you're creating sort of a moment in time that that connects that dot,
Yeah.
that moves it forward. And sometimes that's all it takes for, like you said, a difference in 30% of conversion.
Yeah. That one's a little bit of an outlier, but it has happened a few times.
Yeah, but the 50% is also
Yeah.
pretty wild. I
Yeah.
mean, you've seen double digit impacts for some of these things just based on um, you know, doing something more than what you said, like using an out of the box catch-all Net Promoter Score or
Yeah.
doing an out of the box sort of catch-all feedback form. Leaning into it, I don't know if there's enough craftspeople, if there's enough people architecting these kinds of, very specific moments.
Yeah. It's
Um,
hard to find them. There's not a whole, like,
yeah,
we generally have to train, right, for that. And interesting, by the way,
yeah,
you use the term architect. We actually used to call ourselves insight architects.
I like
Yeah,
it.
I
I
like
like
the
it.
term, but it never caught on, but so
I mean, but it's just like you said, it's so much more than just generic, like voice of customer, like you said, could be generic feedback
yeah.
forms. It could be, I could go to ChatGPT and get 10 questions I should ask at the end of my session. And a lot of times people don't go in to the level of depth that you have, is saying, this is the point in time. This is the area that I want to lean into. This is where I'd want to try something. I am curious about even how you engage with companies. Um, you must be doing something different than some traditional survey groups are doing when it comes to this.
Mhm.
Tell me kind of even how you get from, hi, I do voice of customer work to these strategies.
Yeah. No, it's a great question. I've learned very early on, well, when I first started, we often didn't even say survey, right? Which then people
Mhm.
were, there was a little too black boxy but the challenge was everybody would hear survey. It's like, I never take these. And funny story, even when I started the company, my mother said, I don't take surveys online. And when I do, I'm like, wait, you just said you don't, and then you do. So,
Yeah.
but the perception, because most of them are bad, right? Most of them are bad experiences, and they're mostly ignored. So, what I always described is when I introduce it, I would say high response in the moment, right? So, people generally, when you start to hear in the moment, there's a differentiation right there, because we're not trying to like. I don't think we'd be much better. We'd be a little better because we tie to behavior. We've learned which questions are actually more predictive of outcomes and which ones aren't. Um, Again, that's another. I'm going to keep shooting the net promoter score one, but a lot of people want that. Okay, we'll measure the outcomes, how predictive of it is actually end purchase when we tie to purchase. And things like, did you find what you're looking for? Task completion. How are you intending to buy, or especially how soon do you plan to buy? So much more predictive as outcomes than
Right.
order score. So again, because it's not designed that way, it's designed for retention. Now the net promoter is very good for retention, right? We've done that with B2Bs where we ask a net promoter score, users of that, and we looked at their database who stayed around. It's a good predictor of it. Interestingly, I'm going to just throw a little details and then jump back. But when we've done that, the things that are predictive of retention are what you think of customer support and care. What you think of their pricing when you're already a customer was not very predictive. And so just to walk you through the methodology on this one, we would survey people if they're using, say, in this case, a B2B site, or sometimes B2C, but regular ongoing relationship. And then we would capture their attitudes. We have an ID associated, again, all user opt-in, all optional, and then tie it, 6 months later, we tie it to their database and see who stayed around as a customer, bought, who didn't. Now you're starting to get the truth from this because you're seeing which things are really predictive. And you would see things like improvements. Like one, it was like, I think like a third of the people said, you got to get better pictures of your products. Those people
Yeah.
didn't convert differently. Another one was you have to have improved updates on shipping time, right? Let me know once it's coming or when there's issues and so on. That was a B2B side. That one, if you said you want to improve that, those people dropped off at by far the worst rate. So we're like, okay, this one is a huge signal. Like when they say they want this improved, it is a giant frustration that's driving away. As I said, mentioned that price is obviously a big factor in whether you choose a company or not. Right? But once you've chosen that company, price didn't come into play that much. It was how you were supported over time. So that kind of thing, like, so you start to see the real drivers and barriers of success. And that can be really, really informative for people. So that's
That's
one we
pretty
do.
amazing.
We do about 10 or 20% of the time. We're much more about the actual in the moment piece overall. So
Yeah.
I think you were talking about something else, and I went on one of my one of my tangents. I want to make sure I'm answering your regular question overall.
Yeah, no, I think you are. I mean, ultimately, what I'm getting at is that there is a lot of decisioning you're doing on your end, figure out how to find high value moments to go and do this kind of work. There's a lot of effort on your end figuring out how to phrase things and making decisions. Like you said, is it a binary yes, no, or is it something that requires a free form piece and even laddering up to that? It's like you're fine tuning kind of what's going to work and calibrating and micro calibrating. And a lot of that seems like it comes out of just experience, looking at the data, seeing the impacts downstream and connecting those dots. But a lot of this isn't immediately intuitive.
Mhm.
As you're describing it to me, even very smart analysts would not necessarily have the kind of calibration that it sounds like you're getting just out of doing this over and over again across, sort of uh, various strategies. I'm interested in your perspective. What should people interested in voice of customer be doing differently
Mm.
when they're approaching these kinds of sites and these kinds of opportunities? What should they be doing differently than they're doing today?
Yeah,
Like,
no,
what do you? Yeah,
yeah, it's so the so there, it depends on what they're, some of them are doing today. So A lot of people, you're doing not you're doing surveys of your existing customers, which you should
Sure.
do, right?
Yeah.
And so the gap there is sometimes the question about future intent, right? That's
Okay.
often a mixture, and why do you choose this company? How can you improve? Sometimes those are asked, sometimes those aren't. Um, a lot of the whys are key. But what I'd say the bigger gap with them is more, do they tie that at the individual level to, do they stay, did that customer stay on or not? Right.
Hmm.
That's one of the holy grails, right? Because now, as I mentioned with the people who said, you don't contact me early enough, alert me if there's going to be a delay in delivery, notifications. That's when you find out who's really dropping off and who isn't. And you can personalize things too. Like you can actually ask certain questions, but you got to do it gently, in a way that you can actually personalize some of your communications to it. So that's a gap on that front. But generally, I think like the tying to actual outcomes is a big gap. But most companies are going to survey or talk to their customers in some way, so they're pretty good there. On their digital experiences themselves, that's the biggest gap. So the most common is nothing. The next most common is a feedback button. But you got to think about,
Right.
what is the thing that actually I'm trying to answer, right? You always want to design for measure, to measure against your actual goals. And a feedback button, cut it. The challenge there is that most of them who try to do something more proactive, like what we do, is they're not asking. So I describe it as often a chain. Like each link has to not break to do it right. Right. You got to hit them at the right time. You hit them with the right first question, has to be prominent enough, but not too intrusive. And then you have to actually tie it to your interactions to get the most actionable insight. And if you don't do one part well, you're not going to get much value out of it. So
Right.
I think the,
Right.
the the biggest thing that I think people who are more beginning can do, is trying something on exit, and the question like, did you find what you needed? What were you looking for? And which best describes you, right? Overall. So those are questions that aren't too hard to create. They need to be really short and simple, right? You don't want a long list of, I mean, we have clients that are like, yeah, I have 15 potential different tasks that people be coming for. I'm like, yeah, no, right? You're going to have everybody lead that survey. Boil it down to 5 or 6 and make them short, make it very easy to take in that point. And you'll get some very interesting feedback that you can use. So that's a thing that people can do. The other side, when you're really trying to drive into the drive, to understand the drivers and barriers of purchase or actions, you really need some expert, right? It's just, and I'm not doing that for self-serving. It took
No,
us
it just
years to get to that point of understand. So for example, why didn't you buy, right? One of the options will be price is too high. Okay. Never, ever, ever, ever settle for that, because that can mean so many different things. And we always, like you say, price try. Okay, so let's do a few things. So one is, let's drill down into, what do you actually mean? It's more than I can spend. It's more than others, or I don't see the value of this product, right? Very different things. If it's more than I can spend, it's like, okay, you're
absolutely.
driving the wrong traffic. If it's something where I don't see the value, or I think it's more than others, is it more than others directly, like the actual financial price was too high, or did you not get the value prop, right? So often we see
Right.
the biggest thing is they didn't understand why this product is better. They didn't get the value proposition, and it can vary a lot by organization, but that's like, we'll actually drill down. It's like, so if you say price is too high, we think, how do you think this product compares to others on these 3 factors? And you start to
Hmm.
see, oh, that's the thing. Okay. So they're not even aware that you offer, like one of our clients, it was like they offered a money back guarantee overall. And that was a way of making users confident. Um, Almost none were aware that they did that. So, okay, make that prominent in the checkout process, money back guarantee for 60 days after purchase. Okay, guess what? Conversion goes up when you do that, but we already have it up there. But it's not prominent, and you don't have it when they're actually at that decision point. They're ignoring that message, like that gap between what people were aware of and what they did. So the couple other things on that front around, what are they missing? What I was talking about before, like that everybody should do, but you have to do pretty well. Like if you have a lead gen process, at the end of that lead gen, you've captured their name and email, trigger an optional survey at that point. What do you want to do next? Why'd you do this? What do you expect? And then to some extent, like we've had clients who are good at playing on the margins of that, like get a quick quote, right? where users think, like we find out when we survey them, yeah, 70% thought they're going to get instant quote when they put that in. And instead they're going to call, or they're going to get emails and then a call. So it's, oh, our next step, we're going to call you. It'll come from this area code. It'll be in this point in time. Here's some things that you could ask that could help for that. And now it's like, okay, I know what to expect next. I'm much more likely to answer the call. We've actually measured that. I mean, sometimes 10, 20% percentage point lift in actual engagement with that, because you're now setting expectations about what happens. So yeah, post lead, like you can do lead quality, you can do all that kind of stuff around, something people want to be contacted right now. You can do some great things with that. And there's no friction in the lead process because it's after they became a lead that can be added to.
Right. So
Uh,
you've already got the option, and it's not going to get worse by asking them these questions. But to your point, sometimes it sounds like just by asking the question, it's a different way to prompt them to kind of fill in a gap in their understanding.
yeah.
Other cases, it's filling in a gap of your understanding about I keep seeing this pattern of like almost a dual use or a dual value happening. That you're asking questions that are serving, like they're actually helping increase conversion directly, but they're also helping you get insight
Yeah.
at the same time. And to me, I guess that's kind of the art. That's the calibration. That's where, like you said, a professional who's done this and seen these patterns can implement it. Knows exactly, like you said, those lines of questioning that you just fired off. They sound so natural from your position, but I feel like a lot of people that, again, have just been doing feedback forms, the people especially, they're asking like those 15 question pieces. It's coming from a good place of these are all the things we want answers to,
Hmm.
but it's not coming from a place of this is what they're likely to answer and that isn't going to do any harm and might do the most good,
Yeah, exactly.
right? And that to me is like the next level of all of this. That takes this past just sort of a research exercise and turns it into active optimization.
Yeah. 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 And it's funny you say, because some of the times we have a few questions where we actually say, when we're having clients review it for approval, it's say, you may not care about the results of this question. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to get people started this process. Right. So it's all
Yeah.
around what are they doing in that moment and their expectations. How can we help them? And then it starts off with, oh, this isn't to get information from me. That is, but this might actually help me. Right. We actually find, and there's always a right balance, because we don't want to be misleading with our surveys overall. And, in a lot of cases, we'll use our surveys based on what we found. Like we'll look at what page are they on right now, or what path do they take to get there. Be like, yeah, you're in the wrong spot from what you said. Right. A better, our users who are like you, the people who said they have needs like yours, find that page X is very helpful. Do you want us to take you there to that now? When we ask them that, it's like 70-80% say yes. Like
Right.
I was shocked that it
That's
was that high. It's like, okay, I guess they want help, right? So that's part of the reason there's an intuitive sense. Like we used to, we don't this much anymore, but ask people, so why'd you help us out? Thank you. At the end of it, it's like, and there was a decent portion that said, because I wanted to be directed somewhere to go. It's like, okay, that's interesting. So it's always like, we're listening even to the people we're surveying for our own purposes. So there's some stuff around that. But you asked about applications. So after leads, the other side is what I described as like anytime someone is interacting with a site and entering information so that you can give them, um, show them the right products or offering or localized pricing or whatever it is, that is the perfect time to add in a couple questions to the process to help to narrow down those choices. So the tire example, right? You entered your vehicle, all this stuff. It's like, which types of tires are you looking for? I'm looking for, good ones, but really looking for, cheaper as I can, but still decent tread life. Or I'm looking for a really well-known brand. I'm looking really to care about safety. I want a good value, but I'm really care. So now all of a sudden you can do some merchandising decisions, right? And because if that's integrated in that process, it's not going to cause people to drop off at all, because it's relevant to what they did. The harder part is entering your vehicle information. And now you can be
right.
smarter with what you show. Now, what you ask and how you ask it, there's an art, right? We always even just help them test. Like we'll actually say, we'll do these directly. We'll embed these. And then you can either choose to use us ongoing for that, or you can just, we'll teach you what was best, right? And you can use that from there. So the idea of travel booking, we were entering all this stuff. Okay, again, ask about their intent, right? Are they planning on booking this now, or asking about some of their other preferences so you can show your personalizing. Then when you say most popular, you say most popular for people who cared most about, you know, uh, the most family friendly resort, right? I don't care what, and I care, but I don't care as much about what's popular with everybody. I care about what's popular with people like me, right? Like
Yes.
my interests. That's more persuasive overall.
This podcast is powered by Brandu, a digital marketing agency that not only provides a diverse mix of digital services, but offers guidance, experience, and true partnership to bring your business to the next level. We offer expertise in analytics, paid media, web development, SEO, and design, just to name a few. We've worked with businesses on every level, from local operations to Fortune 500 companies across a variety of industries. We have expertise to help strategize and execute your digital marketing needs no matter what step in the process you're at. We're there for you, from wireframes to paid campaigns. Brandu, experts in everything digital. Please reach out today to learn more about how we can help your business grow.
I think about overlap with a few different areas. So, there's personalization that people can do and that they're trying to do. There are these kinds of AI assistant type bots that they're trying to build in that are never quite work as well as you hope, but maybe in customer service areas they could help a little bit. There's different things there, but they're not exactly, they don't fit in as neatly in the experience as what you're doing, which
Mm.
is kind of more directly in the interface, and it's more intentional. It's more selected. It's not the customer just kind of going off and trying out the help chat tool on in the corner. I'm I guess, how do you see the voice of customer state changing
Yeah.
moving forward?
Yeah, it's I really haven't thought, I mean, I've thought some about the general voice of customer and the big picture, like just understanding your customers. From a website perspective, we actually spent a fair amount of time in the main AI tools to see, okay, what
Mhm,
do they actually predict and say, right? So where are they good
mhm,
and where aren't they? And so when we asked it general things for things that are often asked, so for e-commerce, we actually asked it, what percent of people do you think who visit an e-commerce site and tend to buy? It said, 10 to 15%. Like, that's actually pretty close to what we see across. Now, it varies by individual clients, like, and I don't know which ones we actually do, but it's like, okay, that's a pretty good prediction. Then we said, took in some healthcare sites. We said, go to the site. What do you think the audience is here? Right. Based on comment. It's wildly off. Like one of them was, it said, we said, which portion do you think are pharmacists, nurses, lists, and PCPs, right? It had like no pharmacists, like 1% pharmacists. It was like 30% pharmacists is the actual, right? So it's not even close. We asked them, how successful do you think users are at this site? Sometimes it's like everybody should be successful. Sometimes it's like, and that's most of the time, it skews very positive. Your actual users are saying completely different. At this point, AI is only good with what it's been trained on, right? So
right.
it is pretty good. And so this type of insight around who's actually coming, what do they need, what are they thinking? It's not very good for most of it. E-commerce example, like the intent to purchase, that's a pretty common question. So it's been trained on that. Um, but how it varies by individual site, it's really bad at being able to predict that. Now it might be able to say, hey, your calls to action aren't prominent enough. All the general things that would be good for someone to learn and test out. But when it comes to what's in the head, right, around that decision anxiety and persuasion around wanting to buy from this, like this is the right offering for me, I can trust these guys. It can't. It's not even close right now. It might get there, but it's not even close. Now, and then because of chatbots, like on that front, I like your skepticism there. I think that those things for customer service, I think they'll be great over time, right? High expectations for a really good experience in customer service over time. It's for most, it's not there yet, and that's going to be a barrier to adoption. Or a lot of the chatbots that arrive when you go to a website that you're not even logging into. So it's like, we've done a lot of research around those sites. And like, why don't you use this? Because I hate them. It's like, that's the most,
Yeah, yeah,
they're
yeah,
useless. I
yeah.
hate these
Yeah.
things. So the challenge there is the industry, the quality of those is going to have to be way far ahead uh, for a while before you get adoption. Because what we see is when people have bad experiences, that sticks with them for years. Like, so I'll give you a story here. We had one client where they registered users over time. And so we did a survey of users and asked about their experience with this company. And I forget why, but we did it by when I think we're trying to get something else, but this has happened. We looked at it by month and year of registration. We saw this really horrible spike, like 2.5 to 3 years prior, around all this negative sentiment. Like, what is this about? And so we actually showed them this, like, we don't understand this at all. Like, what, like, this is 2 to 3 years ago. Like, oh, we had a really slow site with a lot of technical difficulties for a period of time around then. So the people who had just joined, that was your first experience. And they were just like, they're still talking about 3 years later, right? So
Yeah.
all those problems
Yeah.
have been fixed. And guess what? We asked them what to improve. It's like, fix the technical issues. It's like, those have been fixed like 2.5 years later. So the point is, you like adopt, like, this has like, what is that? Was it Ogilvy who said the best way to kill a bad product is with great advertising or something like that, right? Try to get adoption. And so vice versa, like, you've gotten, people have really pushed this and it's a bad experience. People are being burned for a while until eventually, like, your use of customer support, that turns out to be really, really good. And then a few of those people are going to start trying the sites, and then there'll be more and more, and then you'll have some that work pretty well. But ultimately, what we find is, most of the chatbots are still type in your thing. The smarter ones make it look more like a survey. They give you a couple options and then type in. People are much more likely to click. Like, if we ever start with open-end question, like, forget, like, our average response is somewhere around like 15 to 20% for not like someone who didn't just do a significant thing. Like a lead one, it's much higher. But if we start open-end, we're going to about at best 1% to take it.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
the tactics.
I still think that your 15 to 20% is amazing.
Yeah, we're like,
Amazing.
if someone said that to me, like, before I started the company, like, yeah, no way. There's no chance.
No way. Yeah. Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
no chance.
One of the big parts that you are doing differently than maybe a lot of pure survey tools is the amount of session activity before and after, and sort of the fidelity of what you capture there. You know, people almost split these things up. They're doing analysis over here, and then they're doing their survey stuff over there. These data sets aren't fully perfectly integrated. Um, Tell me a little bit about kind of you've been doing this for a while. Tell me a little bit about how critical that is to doing this well.
It's the foundation, right? And it's actually, so I started the company primarily to get insights from behavior and survey attitudes together. Over time, we just got really, really good at getting response, right? We didn't start out there. We were pretty bad. We were pretty bad in the beginning. We tested out competitive approaches. We accidentally did things like, for example, yes and no thanks for participating. One time we put no by accident, and it got much better response. That's weird. Like, oh, people don't want to be rude. Okay, so you start to slowly learn the psychology of these things. Sorry, I lost my train of thought here because I get excited about these things. Oh, survey and behavior. Yes. We've had some clients in the past who are like, yeah, is it cheaper to just do the survey? I'm like, yeah. Like, can we just do that instead of tying it to behavior? Because every single survey we do, we track their behavior with it and integrate that and tell you how where your users are struggling, where they are. And the beauty of that is you're not just hearing, hey, half your visitors can't find what they need. You're finding, where do they go to try to find it, right? What are the gaps between, okay, so let's say on the healthcare professional side, common problem is like, you're looking for a mechanism of action. How does this product work? Right? We can actually watch where they go. We see, like, usually it's like 20, 30% ever reach that page. That's a much more insightful gap than I couldn't find what I wanted, right? It was, you watched them where they go, which they clicked on. It's like, oh, they're trying to find it here. Why don't we move the mechanism of action from this support section to the product information section? How about that? And same thing, like I came to buy online, and then you see a bunch of those people never even start the checkout process. It's like, and some of the people don't even reach the product they want. It's like, oh, there's a problem here. Like you got to convince them up front. So yeah, so we actually, so I was circling back to that story. We've had some clients that just want survey only, and we do that. It's so frustrating when we're trying to come up with recommendations, right? We can say things like, well, yeah, your users are really struggling to find, let's just to compare products. Which ones? Well, I don't know. Or their users are really frustrated by high pricing. Some users are really frustrated by high pricing. Well, which ones? Which products? I don't know. Like, so when you tie it to behavior, you can start to see, oh, people went to product line A, they're really pissed. Product line B and C, you're good, right? You start to, and people who said the information wasn't detailed enough, or it missing details. No, product line A, it was good. Product line B, really missing a lot of details. Now you start to see where the problem's occurring. So the actionability is just vastly better. Right? And one of my favorite is, and this applies for almost every site, entry pages, right? So in the last whatever, how many years, you have a lot more traffic entering deep in the site than at your homepage. Your homepage is generally one that's really designed to meet a variety of needs. The gap between what people expected and what the landing page had can be dramatic. Most of the time I'd say the average is less than 50% alignment between what those users wanted and what that offers. So we've had communication companies where they're landing at a page specializing in home-based organizations, and 2/3 of the people are looking for business service. Huge gap. On healthcare professionals sites, just because we've done so many of them, you have people entering at a efficacy page, product effectiveness. And usually it's like 15-20% are looking for effectiveness. The rest of them are looking for something else. And healthcare professionals, they're not spending much time, right? If you don't look like you have what I want quickly, I'm gone. And so huge gap there. And even just by the stage in the journey, where are you when you're trying to do like a patient site? There's often huge gaps between, like, you might be getting a bunch of people who are undiagnosed, but getting tested for a condition, but you thought they were all diagnosed. Or you might have a lot of people who just got prescribed this product, and you're trying to tell people to go to the doctor, see if they have this condition or if this product right for them. It's like, you're not designing it for the people. So when you know what they actually wanted by where they entered, that's among the more actionable things, because it's like, oh, I need to add some prominent links or some blurbs for these types of visitors so I can help get them to the content they want. And you tie it to behavior so we can see at each of the top landing pages, here's your user's profile, and here's the top things they want. Here's the top 3 to 5 things. And then we can even watch who's able to get them anyway and who's just bailing, right, overall.
Yeah. Yeah. Major prioritization value there.
Yeah, and that's
I mean,
it's one of the easier fixes out there, is just that gap, or even just like navigation labels. So we've, so many things where the client uses their own terms and users misunderstand them. Like, again, go back to healthcare professional or healthcare side. Clinical trial results is a very common thing of saying. And on the patient side, it's like, we find out people go to the clinical trial results. It's like half the people were thinking they could enroll in a clinical trial. It's like, no, right? This is the actual product effect. It's like the labeling can be so off.
Mhm. All right. So there's a lot of ground here that you're covering, and it sounds like there's even a lot more that some people should check out. I want to pivot a little bit to getting to know a little bit about how you got into this. But before I do that, just at this point, I'd like to ask you if you could just tell the audience a little bit about kind of where you're publishing some of your findings and kind of where they can learn more about the services that you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. We publish a little bit of the findings. We actually don't do a good job at this. Actually
Okay.
looking at where we actually don't have a whole process going on where we're looking back a lot of our stories overall. And we publish things that we always have to, we like to share the details. So we have to blind them, and we have to make sure they're not specific to an individual client. So, for instance, the tire example I gave, that was from a few years ago. I used to not say tires because that was an insight that was not as known. And now most of the companies are doing something like that. Like, okay, that's fair to share at this point. Just the decision anxiety they have. They don't always know why, but that's a different story. So yeah, we are actually working to collect these and disseminate them, like some of the key insights, like the myths and the gaps. So for example, things like, okay, so behaviors and engagement on a website, what does it actually mean, right? And so the one will go into some detail. I actually had an article years ago on this, is engaged but not happy, right? So we found there's a curve, right? The people who spend, less than 30 seconds on a site, yeah, generally they're going to be pretty dissatisfied. But we saw that people who spent looked at more than 5 pages and 6 pages, 7, they're often much more dissatisfied too, right? It's a different level of frustration. One was disappointed, like, you don't have what I want, I'm out. The other was, I really want this and I can't get it. I'm getting mad, right? It's not rage clicks yet, but they're disappointed in the expectations. So people are looking at it and say, oh wow, we got these like 6, 7 page, 8 page. This is great. It's like, no,
Right.
it's not.
Right.
And so that's one we'll talk about a little bit more. And it varies by type of site. It also varies by task.
Hmm.
Some
Hmm.
tasks that I've quit, so that's the classic, what do you call it? We're trying to label this the bounce blind spot, right? You've seen this all the time.
Yeah.
You bounce it,
Hmm.
high bounce
Hmm.
rate at a certain landing page, right? And we know that this have gotten worse over time. So why is that, right? And it's often one of 3 main things, right? So sometimes the page didn't have what they expected. Okay, that's a problem. Sometimes it's the wrong audience, right? And which page might not have it expected, but you got the wrong audience. And others, yeah, this is a great page. I got what I wanted. I had a quick question. I'm out. Right. So the
Yeah.
one thing
Yeah. Yeah.
everybody can do, and I'm sure you do this a lot, is the first thing you got to really truly track time on that first page, not for people who engage further, which the default thing is, but actually put in scroll tracking and that type of stuff. And we found is if you're spending 40, 50 seconds on that page and then leaving, it's a mixed bag, right? Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's not, depending on the actual page. Um, if you're spending, 20 seconds or less, you're almost never getting the answer you wanted, right? So that's a good way of, when you tie to paid media, right? It's not about necessarily overall engagement. It's about, like, at least remove the people who spend less than 20 seconds, because it's not working. But then the side of, okay, so is it my page, my landing page, or is it my traffic, right? Am I driving people who have a completely different intent or different value? And so we'll often, because we're tying survey data to Clickstream, we're able to actually match it to the actual campaign. So you can start to see which campaigns are driving better intent people, which campaigns are driving people who are going to buy anyway, which campaigns are driving people who have certain needs that you might not meet, but they're super high value. Change your site to help meet those needs. So it's really demystifying that. Uh,
That makes a
I
ton
might
of
have gone
sense.
down a different rabbit hole again. I think you get that story.
No, I do. I do.
So
And
that's,
so, yeah, hopefully they can find some of that
yeah.
information,
So yeah,
from you in the future.
yeah, we're putting that. Yeah, again, we're going to be sharing more and more of that over time, and like, even just like, so presenting at the year, to the little shout out for you guys. I appreciate all the stuff you do in the community, because it's awesome to help bring people together, but I'm presenting, I think, the end of March on actionability, how to get things to be very actionable, which it'll be skewed towards some of the stuff we get just because that's the examples we have, but it's even just like an example. The key thing would be, the more you can quantify, try to put a dollar value to something. Even if it's not perfect, you'll almost never be perfect, but have a rationale and defense around that. People are much more likely to act when you actually can put a dollar value, not, hey, we have these visitors and these are engaged and we think this will be, the site will be a fair amount better if we do X. It's like, we think we're going to drive somewhere between $2 and $6 million in additional sales because of these reasons if we do this. Like, oh, okay. Well, yeah, let's do that. Prove it,
That's
or
awesome.
not prove it, but show me why you believe that. You got to defend it. But yeah, so that's, and then you said, I think the other question was, what got me into this?
That's what I was going to get to. A lot of people, again, you've built all of this refinement over time. You've built all this calibration. You've looked at all of the behavior. You've tried lots of different strategies for deploying these kinds of things, and you've gotten some pretty epic results over time. but there are a lot of people in our audience that might want to get into this kind of work.
Yeah.
And it's helpful for them to kind of hear how someone even gets into this. Now, we know that you started your own company. We know that's a big part of it is the entrepreneurship. But I think it would be great if you could just tell a bit of your story of kind of, what inspired you to kind of get into this direction.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And I'll try to make sure you follow up with me on the how this can be tips specifically helpful for people, because there's a whole side around how people can start doing something like this on their sites or that they control. So mine, I actually started as an engineer designing
Hmm.
building systems, like, so for large campuses, laboratories, data centers. It turns out, like, so we did a lot of like the electrical and HVAC systems for data centers to make sure, and a lot of redundancy, because if that data center goes down, we got big problems.
Yeah.
And so that was, this is in the late 1990s. And
Okay.
so data centers were a big thing. And now it's like, that's, you think about Elon talking about putting these out in space, which tough to even comprehend that, but it's because of the electrical load and heat load on these things. They're just tremendous amounts of that. So I designed those systems. I would design, I did a couple other interesting projects, underground facility built for a nuclear war in South Georgia. That was fun. So if I messed up and it didn't work, I would never know. I'd be dead. And then the one that is always a good icebreaker when they say, tell us something about you wouldn't believe. I'm like, I spent 90 days in a federal penitentiary. They're like, huh? I don't believe that. It was 90. It was, sorry, 30 days. It was 30 different days. But actually designed the underground steam system in an Atlanta federal penitentiary. So pretty wild stuff. And that's what drove me away. Not because of the
Right.
prison.
Right.
It was good stories. I mean, you're with these. A side note, this is a funny one. I'm the first, like, this is probably my third day. I'm like 23 or 24 years old, and you go between these huge cell blocks, and they merge in, and I'm with this little security guard. He's like this tall. I mean, he's like probably like barely 5 foot. The prisoners go in, and there's like 50 prisoners, and then they lock the gates around it because they're about to transfer. I'm like, what do I do if these guys get mad? Right? What do I?
I know.
That was interesting by itself, but actually, I joked around a lot with these guys. I made sure I didn't say something stupid, but they're pretty funny. Maximum security, so these are not your friendly guys. Um, so the story there was, the whole space was like, I did projects where it's like, I know I didn't design the best system. I know there's some issues with it. And people are like, oh, this is great. And then the prison one, I actually had some really good engineering design ideas that changed how, like, saved the client a ton of money on the steam system. The contractor messed it up because it was non-conventional, because he didn't really listen to the plans very much. And it's like, he's going to do it his way. And I had to be in a room when I'm like, dude, like 24 years old, and there's like me as the engineer and 20 contractors telling the client why I was wrong. I was like, but here's why it's right. It's like clear as can be. It saved you all this money. And I look bad. I'm like, okay, this is kind of like, innovation in that space is not rewarded. So that really hit me, and that kind of drove me away from that. I went back and got an MBA. Uh, Actually, before I go to that, the one thing that really stuck with me in that whole space, though, was you would do really extensive plans. So you're designing a building, have a very sophisticated design with all the materials spec'd out, everything else. When I look at the level of plans we had versus the way measurement plans are done, just a completely different world. Like, measurement plans, right? We're constantly pushing our clients, like, have an actual plan. What are your goals? What do you want? And we'll help you get that. But it's often done as an afterthought. And that's one of the things, like, if you have a really good plan and you design to capture the measures you're going to need, you're much, much more likely to be successful. So that was one of my things that sort of took from there. But anyway, I went back to the MBA. Then I landed a job running a strategy team um, for agency, and we were working for Fortune 500 companies. And the third day of my job, they tell me, okay, what are your recommendations for this site? I'm like, I don't know. I don't have any information.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
remember saying, well, what are the visitors doing? Like, oh, we don't know. Like, what do you mean you don't know? We don't track that. I'm like, you guys don't have any data? Well, let me ask. So go down these things, and we started to get data on this, like, well, they're using this and not this. So like, okay, well, That's when you start to see, okay, well, this isn't across these sites, no one's using these features. So why are we wasting time developing them? But on this site, they're really using this feature, and this other site, they're not. So is it due to the navigation? Is it due to the different audience? What is it caused by? And then ultimately, it's like for some of them that aren't e-commerce, like, oh, what does it mean? Right? What value does it have? And so that ultimately led to the idea of like, let's actually hear from people in the moment and find out, ask those questions that web analytics couldn't answer. And really eye opening, right? In so many ways across, like for most spaces. I'd say the one area where it's useful, but we don't really focus on much. It's just media and entertainment, right? There's the things that are going to drive that. Like you're coming back to that site a lot. Yeah, we'll learn some stuff, will improve, but it's not going to be as transformational as a high consideration site, right? Or your B2B pharma or any of those. We're going to find a ton of stuff that, like, our average conversion lift for using us for a year is over 40%, right? That's after they've done a lot of the good things already in place, because we're finding the things that they have missed because you're not hearing from users in the moment, not finding those problems, right? So you've already fixed the calls to action. You've already fixed these basic things. You have a good, you remove friction where you can, but you don't remove the persuasion friction, right? Because you don't know it exists.
So, so, when I think on this story, I mean, the engineering background resonates a lot with me. I was in engineering before I got into
Hmm,
any of this marketing
really?
or website or usability piece. And I was in space systems engineering, kind of functional availability and models and resource allocation models and things of
Hmm.
just physical things.
Oh, nice.
And to your point, when I stepped into marketing, it felt like a lot of that rigor that we're used to in engineering just wasn't normal. It wasn't mainstream. It's actually a superpower, I think, for a lot of people that are in engineering, if they are able to transpose some of that kind of thinking over.
Hmm.
To your point, how you approached the detail is you're approaching it like, hey, if I build a building and we haven't done our measurements or our tolerances or our materials decisions correctly, it could fall over,
Yeah, yeah.
you know?
People
And
die, basically.
disastrous things,
It's a different
steam
story.
steam could explode,
Mm.
right? Like there are all these things that could happen. And so, it forces you into a sort of rigor where you're like, I want all of my details, I want all of my information lined up, and I want to make good, clear decisioning. And also the fact that I wonder, like with the building design piece, there's obviously you can design an amazing thing, but you have to, by default, think about the people, think about the maintenance, think about all the other pieces that go along with it. What's interesting on the web and with what we do is making some changes to UX is usually relatively a low effort
Mhm.
task. It's not hard to change a link. It's not hard to to make some UX adjustments. Is does seem to be hard is, to your point, to bring that rigor to your information collection and the thoughtfulness and sort of the detail that's required to be able to know that this is actually the link that's worth
Yeah.
changing that could make all the difference in the world. So I think that's super interesting. And I would like you to, tell the audience some tips, especially if they're thinking about, moving in this direction.
Yeah.
Sometimes we do find people that are in other forms of engineering and they're like, could I even make it over into this marketing world? There are other people in marketing that, I think it would be helpful to hear from you, who's kind of been doing this for quite some time now, pretty much almost as long as the web's been around. Um, and I'm saying that as a positive thing. Um, I think it would be good if you could just share some tips for people that, from a career pathing
Yeah.
standpoint that might be interested in getting into this.
Yeah. And just really before I go into some detail on that, so the idea of it's very interesting with, especially if you're coming from an engineering perspective or a more
Mhm.
rigorous based perspective. Marketing is a different animal. It's changing over time, but it still has its heritage.
Yes.
And what the challenge we still face, and it's not specific to marketing, but when you don't have clear data to make decisions, right? Um, the highest paid person in the room, the hippo concept, is often going to get their way. or the most persuasive person is going to get their way,
Mhm.
or maybe the bully, right? When you do things that uncover what the people who you're trying to influence really need and think, and you can make that information very trustworthy and make it very clear, it's really hard to argue against that, right? You have to, and here's where it comes down. When you have a story that that you can make some quick changes, like UX changes and stuff, you don't need to defend it a whole lot, especially because you can often test it. Now, farm is a different animal because you have to defend it because it's a huge pain to change anything. But for most sites, like especially e-commerce, yeah, just have at it, right? When we make recommendations around UX tweaks, they usually don't ask much about the methodology beyond that's like, okay, yeah, you think that? Great. Your stuff is right before, so we'll do that. Make recommendations and find some insights that require operational changes or are ones that, so basically like one of ours was, and I can go into more detail if you want later. One of ours was, oh, you have a lot of people coming for same day appointments. It's costing you 5 million in lost sales because you don't offer same day appointments. You should do that. They cared about the methodology. How do you know that's true? To walk them through the details of it. That you have to prove it, why that matters. So generally, yeah, like in marketing, it's like if you're coming from more technical basis, more rigorous basis, you want to get in a place where you are going to be armed with the information and data to make those types, help inform that type of decision. And then your challenge is how do you simplify it? And Brian, I'm sure it's like, oh, it's so hard. It is so hard to rigorously to get the rigorous data. All these things, and then you're trying to boil it into just this versus this, right?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
and I'm the one I always like my team. I'm like, okay, we got to make this simpler. We got to make this simpler. And I'm sure it drives them crazy. But then I say to them like, yeah, guess what? When I would do these presentations in the past, or I'd create these things, I look back 2 weeks later, I'm like, oh, why didn't I make this simpler? So you generally, you need time away, you need outside voice, but that's the other, like it's people don't act when they're overwhelmed with details, right? You have to boil it down and then you have to support it. Like you don't want to lose the details, but you have to boil things down into the bigger picture. That was my biggest takeaway from my MBA was, wow, I got to learn how to simplify what I say because it's not working. And on that front, like, and if you say, here, we should change this because we think it's costing us 4 million in lost sales. Ooh, that's a simple story. That's a persuasive story. Again, you have to back it up, but rather than saying, well, we have to change this because only 5% of users used it and they were 13% more engaged and they came from these URLs and did this. It's like, what do I do with that?
Right. Exactly.
Doesn't work.
You're expecting them to kind of do all the mental math.
Yeah.
So the main tips are simplification is a huge asset here,
Shoot.
and
Yep.
getting the right data to uncover details is kind of the other unsung hero here.
Yeah.
The people that can make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And so some people who are getting into it, like so you have to be there to actually get some of the stuff. The other side is if you're trying to sort of dabble in it, reach out to some nonprofits and say, hey, learn Google Analytics, as nightmarish as that is right now. Unfortunately, we've had to build our own visualization just because it's so brutal. But if you can even work with some nonprofits, get some of the like a full story or mouse flow where they actually show individual users interacting with the site, watch what they do and then tell them some of the results. You're going to be able to share some interactions of actual users in a way that they haven't seen before. So you'll start to understand that. And now you'll be able to develop a story around, you'll be able to understand, okay, do I actually like this stuff? Right? Am I actually good at this? And then can I pitch myself? And so why I said, like, if you're not in the space, like, offer yourself for free for doing some work for profit, like Brian's company, or for a nonprofit, just like we actually do some pro bono work for some nonprofits. They love it, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a good way of just sort of getting some experience if you don't have it, because it's hard, like Brian. So it'd be hard for you to hire somebody with no experience in the space. Right? It's a lot easier when someone actually can show you stuff and you can see how they think.
Yeah, there is a talent gap.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of what you're saying is that there is an experience gap, really. Not a talent gap, but an experience gap.
Mhm. So if you're interested in trying to understand the actual people, right, who are visiting, that's an essential thing. Even in organizations, people like that inside baseball concept, like they know their own product too well. So showing other people the site, right, who might be in the target audience, and just getting feedback. That's a good, a few initial steps. It's not even very hard. Say, what do you think? Like, imagine you're doing this task. Now, the challenge there is it's not the actual people who are visiting. So, but it's a good sort of first step. Other things, you can use a basic tool like a Hotjar or something like that and start running some short surveys, start experimenting with that. Measure response rate, measure what they're saying, and then test different questions. We learned most of our stuff from just tests, just constant tests. Like even one of my favorites is, okay, we're doing this. Let's do the opposite. Let's see what happens, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
let's ask something completely different. And, I would say AI is interesting on that front because it actually has been helpful for coming up with other ideas that we wouldn't think of, right? So word it this way. What do you think? It's actually really bad at coming up with the exact questions we should ever use right now, but from ideation, phenomenal. And that's where, so experimenting, trying, just running a lot of tests. That's by far the best way to learn something on this front. And then the AI front, like the like tips around that, it's really tough to tell where that's going to go, right? We know it's going to replace tasks that we do. It's going to replace certain jobs over time. It's tough to tell exactly how fast that will happen and what roles will in detail will sort of start to disappear. The one thing but you have to think about what's not going to disappear, right? That simplification concept, telling a meaningful story to the company, that's not going to disappear. Like that is the most fundamental thing anybody who wants to be in analysis and even marketing should be able to do really well, is tell that really simple story, but based on real actual data. Second one from an analyst perspective is validation, right? This probably doesn't get talked enough, but as AI is used more and more for things, trying to find insights. And we use it to try to find insights. And it's mixed. It's much more better for mediation at this point. But it's actually not dissimilar from when people, like I've had people on my team and people worked with, who they pull some data and they make some recommendation based on some data. We're like, you sure that's right? Right. So it's always like,
Yeah.
came from our system. It says that. It's like, yeah, check into that. Right. It just because it was spit out by a computer doesn't mean it's accurate. And so being able to check what AI recommendations are, like ask it for its rationale and then actually check into the data, the validation piece is going to be an absolutely essential thing. For just to make sure that's actually right. So you're sort of doing some auditing, which isn't super sexy, but it's a necessary thing. And the other side, I think learning how to use AI for expanding the model and analysis, right? So finding patterns you might have missed, but also saying, when you make it secure in certain things and not training sets, say, okay, so what other trends are going on that might have affected this? Look broadly and try to find that. It's trained pretty well to do that type of stuff. And so that's going to find things you would never have had time to look at. But it can be really good, like really good. Now, is it going to know your individual thing exactly? Like we'll see how quickly it's able to figure that out and produce useful insights, but will it tie to other sources? Absolutely. And on the survey front, we found it phenomenally good at summarizing and qualifying and quantifying open-end text, right? So that one, it's AI's phenomenal, right? So we still do some on our own, but it's like we're just asking AI questions at that point. So there are certain things it does really well now. It's going to do some other things well later. It will be able to probably tell some stories with a lot of training. And so there's value in you training in that. But at the end of the day, it's like, you got to be guiding that. You got to be able to the one driving that story itself. That's my take overall. And some of that's going to be wrong. We'll find out how it all goes. I don't know, Brian, have you any tips from your perspective with AI coming full bore?
Yeah. I mean, there's quite a bit. The short answer is I feel like AI is always great at giving you 80% of what you're asking for, 80% right, 80% of the time. And it's really amazing at that. And it does create a lot of challenges, to your point, of like false positives or sort of, slightly adjacent conclusions. I think that what you're saying makes a ton of sense. I know that part of what we're dealing with right now is, there are challenges with websites and bots that are um, really agents that are trying to access some of our designs, our interfaces that were meant for humans. And we have to think about how to deal with that in our data and how to separate it out and how to segment it. And there are, some things that we're working on right now. I guess I feel like you're talking about how to use agents, and it's certainly a big part of it, how we can use agents to better process our data sets and how to draw more insights. And I think it's getting pretty good at that. To be honest, 80% right, 80% of the time is actually still very helpful. Directionally, it cuts a lot out. And like you said, when you follow up with the validation step, it's extremely helpful. The I guess the other side of kind of what's happening here is figuring out when we're going to have to create applications and sites to for the agents, and how do we start improving usability for them to make sure that they're able to do tasks that hopefully send a positive message back to their user, their human, and that will do business with us. And so I just feel like there's a lot in the space to explore. There's a lot of opportunity in the space for us to jump into. And I'm looking forward for these tools to get better over time. I think sometimes various other forms of machine learning are better than LLMs depending on the use case. I think for text, LLMs obviously are at the top. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a space that we see where the trends are going, and where we prioritize moving forward should be um, making sure we make, there are micro uses for these tools that we want to make sure that we're inserting them into those workflows. It's not the answer for everything, and it's not going to replace us, but it is a very useful set of tools that we can use to do our jobs better or faster.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, the more we can use that tool and learn it and how it applies, better. But that's the other aside. Like I can't underemphasize, like when you said the validation piece too, for especially for people with less experience, that validation is so essential, right? It's gonna because with measurement, integrity, accuracy is like once people lose trust in you because you made some mistakes, that goes like it's hard to gain it back.
It's like the whole program is now under microscope. Yeah.
It's human nature. It's what you remember when that. Now, if you say things like, "Hey, we found a bunch of recommendations, and these are easy tweaks and tests we can try out, and we think we're not going to. Some of these are going to be wrong. They're not going to work." If you set that expectation, right, because they're easy tweaks, yeah, you don't need to validate some of that stuff. So you're 80% right. Like if they're easy changes that you can test, but man, if you're changing operations at a company or
Yeah, yeah,
half
yeah.
$1 million thing on that, validate that and make sure it's really, really true.
Well, and these tools can help you do that. They can help you find some of the validation data. They can help you, figure out what your selects are. And that is a big step up from a day when you had to come up with the ideas yourselves. You had to go and pull the data, not knowing if there's anything valuable in it. And you had to kind of do all of that thinking in advance. To your point, this should speed up the learning curve for people to be able to do this at a much better level. So looking forward to that. So this is great. So thank you. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you. And great questions. Really, really enjoyable discussion. I appreciate your patience with my pontificating. I hope the audience doesn't mind the rabbit holes that I sometimes go down.
I think it's great. I think they're here for it.
Yeah, I mean, being able to pick the brain of an expert such as yourself is just like super intriguing, especially there's like so much psychology that goes into proper analytics, and being able to see how you approach the inner workings of just refinement is super valuable. So thank you so much for coming on. This has been great.
Awesome. Thank you. And again, I really just saying, appreciate how much you guys do for the community and helping to support and advocate analytics. It's awesome. You guys are just great. So thank you.
So thank you everybody for spending time with us. You can learn more about BrainDo and our marketing services on our website at www.brain.do. If you'd like to see more for us as well, we're also on social media such as Instagram and TikTok, along with Facebook and LinkedIn. Typically, our handles are brain.do. So if you learned anything helpful and would like to dive more into a conversation with us, please leave us a comment, and we would love to answer any questions as well. Otherwise, we'll see you next time at the Roundtable.
The Roundtable.